I've always kept the blue cardigan folded in the top drawer, even in July. It's not for warmth. There's a stain on the right cuff from tomato soup I once reheated in Sophie's old apartment, and a tiny snag at the collar where the thread gave up quietly one winter. I never fixed it. The call came on a Tuesday. I had just closed the laptop after booking my flight. Seat 12A window early boarding. Rachel's name blinked on the screen like something routine. I remember thinking it must be about the pie dish, or maybe allergies. Eli had a list of them that changed every year. She spoke as if we had already agreed, like we'd had the conversation and I'd simply forgotten. Eric thought I should be the one to tell you. This year, we're keeping things small, just the core. He says it's better that way. I looked down at the tea I'd been steeping, the water gone cool, the bag still floating. 14's already a squeeze, she continued. You understand, right? No, I didn't. But I didn't say that. There was a pause, short and practiced. We didn't want you to be uncomfortable. The flight, the stairs, the noise. Her voice trailed off in a way that made it clear I wasn't meant to fill the silence. When I hung up, I didn't move for a while. I heard the faint thrum of the refrigerator behind me. The light in the kitchen flickered once. A tiny pop of electricity, like even the bulb was tired. I opened my inbox to forward the flight details to Eric, something I always did without being asked, but the confirmation was already gone. A cancellation notice had replaced it, time-stamped just 3 minutes earlier. The booking had been voided. Payment source withdrawn. I clicked into the airline site. My login still worked, but the itinerary page was blank. I wasn't going anywhere. There was a thin line between this must be a mistake and they planned this. I balanced on that edge for a few seconds longer than I should have. Later that afternoon, I opened my social media account. I don't scroll often too many baby announcements and women my age pushing vitamins, but sometimes they post things there before they remember to tell me. The photo was lit by candlelight. A table set with white napkins, gold chargers, wine glasses already half filled. There were 14 seats. I counted twice. Everyone was tagged but me. The caption read, "Table is set. Family only." I stared at it until the screen dimmed from inactivity. When I touched it again, the image returned unchanged. I didn't cry. I clicked away, refreshed my email out of habit. An automated notice waited at the top. Access removed from Ruby's education fund portal. Changes initiated by account manager Eric Bennett. I hovered over the notification, reread the subject line. Then again, I checked the fund's website. My credentials had been disabled. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I waited, then tried again. Still nothing. I typed out a message, just saw the flight cancellation, hoping it's a mistake. Let me know if I should rebook on my own. The reply came 30 minutes later. I'm in meetings. Don't stress. Everyone agreed it's better this way. Everyone. The bottle of red wine I kept for guests was still unopened. I poured a glass without checking the year. It didn't matter. It left a faint ring on the coaster, the one Sophie made in 4th grade, with beads and glue and a warped sense of symmetry. I lifted the glass, sipped. Not because I wanted to celebrate or forget, but because my hands needed something to hold that wasn't a phone. I went to the hall closet and opened the top shelf where the Thanksgiving linens were stored. The embroidered runner, the gravy ladle, a card from Ruby with a traced hand that said, "Gobble, gobble, Grandma," in shaky marker. I didn't touch them, just closed the door again. When the heat clicked on the pipes, knocked under the floor like old bones adjusting. I imagined what the other table sounded like. Clinking forks, muffled laughter, someone calling for more stuffing. I tried to picture where I would have sat if there had been a 15th chair. The truth is, I knew the temperature of that decision. It wasn't spontaneous. It was set to low and slow, like the oven dial Rachel once turned down behind my back, because she said I always roasted the turkey dry. I remember her exact words spoken in the kitchen 3 Thanksgivings ago, while she arranged the silverware with surgical precision. Mothers-in-law have a way of making themselves essential long after they're wanted. She hadn't realized I'd returned from the bathroom. Eric had changed the subject before I said anything. I didn't bring it up. I'd thought silence was a way of keeping peace. Now I know it just keeps things in place. My tea had cooled completely. I emptied it into the sink and rinsed the cup with more pressure than needed. The pie dish was still wrapped in a towel near the door. I'd packed it carefully that morning, the same one I'd used the last 12 years. A chip on one edge from Ruby's 6th birthday when she'd tried to carry it herself and dropped the corner. I unwrapped it, ran a finger along the chip, and placed it back in the cabinet. 3rd shelf, behind the slow cooker. The silence in the room didn't feel like waiting anymore. It felt like an answer. I poured the rest of the wine. Not because I was upset. I wasn't. At least not in a way I could define. It was more like watching paint dry on a door that would never open again. When I checked my phone once more before bed, there was a message from Rachel. Hope you understand. We're all just trying to keep things simple this year. I didn't reply. There's a drawer in my nightstand with old receipts, a broken necklace, and the last photo I have of all of us together. I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to. Some losses don't require confirmation, only recognition. That night I left the kitchen light on. Not for anyone coming home. Just because I liked how it softened the room. I used to believe that if I made everything easier for everyone else, they'd leave a little space for me. There was a pair of orthopedic shoes I wore the winter I stayed with them. 3 months of babysitting, while Rachel eased back into her job adjusting to full-time again after Eli. I kept those shoes by the garage door soles stiff from snow salt and stairs. I remember thinking they made too much noise on the hardwood. I started walking in socks by week 2. When it ended, they emailed me a thank you card. Digital, no signature. A pastel background with a cartoon bear and balloons. We couldn't have done it without you. The line blinked, centered, formatted, and untrue. I printed it once, folded it in half, then left it in the back of a drawer. Rachel used to say things like, "We're lucky you're available," with her eyes still on the stovetop. I kept responding with a version of "any time," though the word had started to taste chalky. I still packed the kids' lunches every night, sliced apples with cinnamon like Sophie liked as a child. Ruby never noticed. One night when Eli was 5, his fever climbed high. They called close to midnight. Rachel's voice clipped and controlled. I drove across town with an open bottle of children's ibuprofen in the cup holder, praying not to hit ice. When I arrived, the porch light was off. She opened the door halfway, didn't step aside. "Thank you. We'll handle it from here." I handed her the bag and waited a second longer than I should have. She nodded once and closed the door before I could ask if he was okay. That was the night I started keeping a record. Not with pen and paper, just small markings in my head. Tally marks that didn't make a sound. The Disneyland trip came the following year. "Too much walking for you," Eric had said. Besides, the kids need their own space. They brought back a t-shirt for me, black with glitter letters, "Grandma Rocks, size XL," though I wore a medium. The tag was still attached. Rachel placed it on the hallway table with a note. "You can take a picture in it. The kids would love that." I put it in the linen closet. It stayed there until I donated it last spring. Eric's 40th birthday was hosted at a restaurant with dim lighting and deep booths. I arrived 15 minutes early, holding the wrapped gift I had agonized over, a personalized fountain pen engraved with his initials. I was seated at the end of a folding table near the wall, where the high chair and coats were kept. Rachel looked over once and mouthed, "We ran out of room," before turning back to the center of the table. No one offered to switch. I left after dessert before speeches. The server boxed my food without comment. I once sent Rachel a text after Ruby's piano recital. Just a short message. I wonder if she'd like lessons over the summer I could help arrange. 10 minutes later, a screenshot of my message showed up in the family group chat reposted by Rachel. Her caption, "Some people still don't understand what boundaries mean." No one replied. Not even Eric. That was the first time I removed myself from the thread for a full week. Not that anyone noticed. The pill bottle had a label warning against skipping doses. I ignored it once, cut the morning dose in half because the flight to Arizona had been rescheduled, and I didn't want to feel sluggish around the children. I remember sitting through the layover in Dallas with a tightness in my chest that never quite went away until I returned home. I didn't tell anyone. There's a green tin box in my kitchen labeled cookies for guests. I made shortbread from scratch one December and packed them carefully with wax paper and string. Rachel returned the tin a week later. It was empty except for a sticky note folded in half. The front read, "Thoughtful." The inside edges got a little burned. "Don't stress so much next time." The tin went back in the cabinet. I haven't opened it since. Sometimes kindness becomes a costume. You wear it so long the lining rubs away, but you keep putting it on hoping no one notices the seams. There was a photo on their mantel once taken during a summer picnic. Everyone in white. I stood to the far left holding Ruby's hat. When I offered to help frame it, Rachel looked at me with that voice she used when she didn't want to start a disagreement. "I think we'll crop it. Makes it cleaner." My left hand still made it into the final print. You can see the ring I wore, then silver slightly tarnished. It used to belong to my mother. I stopped wearing it last year, not because it no longer fit, but because no one ever asked why I wore it. I checked the wall calendar today. There was a red mark on November 23rd, circled weeks ago. I don't remember if I did that in pen or pencil. The ink looked faded, like it had sat in the sun too long. I reached for the corner of the page and tore it straight across the middle. No hesitation. The sound echoed a little too loud in the quiet room. The piece with the red circle fell to the floor. I didn't pick it up. Some names fade before they're forgotten. Some were never meant to be remembered. I once found an old index card inside a library book. To whoever reads this, it said in red pen, "You matter." I kept it for years, taped it inside a kitchen cabinet just behind the cinnamon. Eventually, the ink faded to the color of dried strawberries. The birthday card arrived in a cheap envelope, off-white, with a printed balloon and the message already pre-stamped inside. "Happy birthday from all of us," in looping gold script. No signature, no pen marks. Just a printed sentiment and silence. I turned it over to check for handwriting. Nothing. The first time I read it, I told myself it was just busy schedules. Ruby had midterms, Rachel had meetings. Eric never liked birthdays. The second time, I pressed the crease flat and placed it in the kitchen drawer with the warranty papers. The third time, I stopped pretending. They once gave me a t-shirt for Mother's Day. One size too large, navy blue, with a guitar printed across the chest. The words read, "Grandma Rocks." No tag, no card, just the shirt in a grocery bag. I folded it and left it in the closet next to a coat I hadn't worn since David's funeral. At the library, they named me Volunteer of the Year. They handed me a mug with daisies painted on the rim and a photo frame with my name spelled correctly for once. The local paper ran a 3-paragraph blurb under a headline about a high school fencing team. I cut it out and sent it to Eric with a sticky note. 3 days later, he sent a text, "Cool." The message had a period at the end. Not a smiley, not a heart. Just that full stop, as if the conversation had been too long already. David wrote a letter to Eric when he turned 16. I found it after he passed, tucked inside a folder labeled Boys. The ink was fading at the edges. The writing slanted and pressed deep into the paper. A paragraph on kindness, one on telling the truth, one about learning to be alone without bitterness. I copied it by hand onto stationery with gold trim, tied it with ribbon, and gave it to Eric for Father's Day. He emailed me a scanned PDF, saved it. Better if you hold on to the original. Safer that way. The image was crooked, the resolution low. His only addition was a file name, Dad, a letter, old, PDF. In their front hallway, there's a shelf of framed family photos. Ruby with her cello. Eli at the pumpkin patch in cowboy boots. Rachel posing with her parents at a winery. Eric holding a birthday cupcake, laughing. Even the golden retriever Scout has a frame. There's no photo of me. I asked once while helping with dishes after dinner. I noticed there's no picture of Rachel. Didn't look up. We didn't want it to feel too cluttered. I didn't finish the sentence. Just dried the same plate twice, then set it down carefully so it wouldn't clink. There's a difference between being absent and being edited out. Most people don't notice when the lines crossed. Ruby once texted me by mistake. I was steeping tea when my phone lit up. Ugh. Grandma's coming again. Then the message disappeared, deleted before it landed. But I saw it. My tea was too hot to drink after that. I left the mug untouched until it cooled into a skin. Thanksgiving the year before, I arrived early with my pecan tart. Still warm, wrapped in foil cloth napkin tucked underneath. Rachel answered the door wearing a cashmere sweater and an expression too smooth. You're early. We're still arranging the table. I offered to help. Maybe just relax this year. We've got it covered. In the powder room, I washed my hands with rose soap. Through the vent, I heard her voice drift from the dining room. She's trying again. Just watch the food. I swear the smell of old hands lingers. The towel I used left pink lint on my palm. I rubbed it off slowly as if it had been dust. At dinner, Eric stood and thanked Rachel's parents for flying in and everyone who made tonight possible. I lifted my glass when he looked in my direction, though he didn't name me. Later, while they served coffee, I excused myself and walked to the bookshelf. On the bottom shelf, tucked behind the cookbooks, I found a shoebox with my handwriting, old letters, most still folded, some brittle at the edges. Grocery lists, sticky notes, postcards from places I'd never gone but pretended to care about. I took them home that night and laid them out on my dining table like old receipts. Most were still legible. A few smelled faintly of lemon oil. Some had thumb smudges. Others bore the indent of where someone had pressed too hard with a pen. There was a note David had written me in 1982. You always hold the umbrella for others, it read, even when you're the one soaked. I folded them all into a single envelope, white, unsealed. I didn't label it, didn't address it. On the front, I wrote 5 words in pencil. No need to send more. I slid it into the back of the drawer where I keep my kitchen scissors and coupons. The next day, I removed the t-shirt, the one that said Grandma Rocks. I used it to clean the window pane and tossed it in the donation bag after. Names can vanish in silence. But sometimes, silence is what names you back. I never liked the way my name looked in typed font. The curves vanished. It became someone else's. I opened the email on a Tuesday morning. The subject line was too neat: transaction confirmation, $5, $800, withdrawal. I stared at it without touching the mouse. The sender was the retirement bank I used for the smaller account, what I used to call the quiet fund. The one I never talked about. The one I thought was still mine. The details blurred a little when I read them. Authorized transfer. Account consolidated under Eric Bennett. Memo family consolidation. I didn't remember giving him access, but the date listed for authorization was familiar. March 14, 2016. The day I left the hospital with a medical bracelet still pressed against my wrist. I'd signed something in the car he held. The clipboard said it was for emergency health permissions. The pen had skipped over the dotted line. I called the help number. A young man with a tired voice confirmed everything with absolute calm. "Yes, ma'am. It's a legal digital authorization. Your son is listed as the sole co-owner. The withdrawal was processed yesterday. Funds transferred to a shared household account." The words were clear. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I thanked him, though he hadn't helped. Then I hung up without saying goodbye. Inside the file cabinet behind old tax returns, I found the paper copy. My handwriting was there, tight, slanted. His was underneath. Bigger. Confident. I traced the line between them with the back of my thumbnail. I didn't call. I didn't write. I just watched. That night, long past midnight, I opened my social media account. Rachel's face greeted me first. A video. She was standing in front of a community center with a red banner behind her that read, "Bennett Family Foundation Scholarship Event." She was smiling, holding a check the size of a kitchen table. In the frame just behind her, I saw myself, blurry, standing off to the side in a long gray coat, folding my hands. The caption under the video read, "Grateful to give back. A special donation from our young Bennett family to help local students thrive." Someone commented, "Was that your mother-in-law in the video?" Rachel responded an hour later, "She's always supported us." In spirit. Spirit. Not a mention of the account. Not a thank you. Not even my name. Later that morning, I found a printed version of the newsletter from the event. Someone must have slipped it into my mailbox. My name appeared only once on the list of attendees, between a city clerk and a florist. No title, no note. Rachel called 2 days later, her voice too cheerful, like nothing had shifted. "We've been meaning to talk to you about the scholarship direction. We really needed it to look unified. Hope that's okay." There was a pause, but not for my answer. "Also, we wanted to ask if you could remove that old book donation plaque at the library. They said it confuses patrons when it says, 'In honor of Gloria A. Bennett.' It makes it seem independent." She waited for acknowledgement. I didn't speak. Finally, she offered what I think she considered generous. "Anyway, the whole family agrees it reflects better when we act as one." When I hung up, I sat in the kitchen and turned the old ceramic mug I kept for tea, cracked at the handle edges dulled with time. I'd once used it during Ruby's storytime mornings. It had faint fingerprints still along the side. I used to think they were sweet. I used to wash around them. I reached for the locked drawer. The metal creaked. Inside was the trust document, the black folder I hadn't opened in years. I read every page. Eric's name appeared 4 times. Each time it followed the phrase, "beneficiary of secondary funds." Each line, once signed in good faith, felt like a mirror I'd stopped recognizing. I took out a black ink pen. One of the heavy ones, metal, not plastic. I pressed hard and drew a line through his name. Not a scribble, a single line. Clean. Unmistakable. There was a voicemail from him later that week. "Hey, I know the bank thing probably caught you off guard. It was never meant to exclude you. It's just, we needed to streamline some things." Then quieter clipped, "This is what families do. We move together. No apology. Just expectation." I remembered the way my late husband used to fold napkins precisely at the dinner table, even when we ate soup. "Disorder breeds distance," he once told me when I left a drawer open. He would have called this distance. I closed the document folder and slid it back into the drawer. Not because I doubted myself, but because I'd already done the necessary thing. I think I used to believe love was maintenance, showing up, helping, staying useful. I did that. For decades. They took the account. They took the credit. And now they wanted my name polished off the edges like it had never mattered, like I had always been a shadow with no claim, no voice raised, no door slammed. I folded the latest bank statement twice, then again. I tucked it behind the gas bill. I poured hot water into the cracked mug and watched the steam rise without lifting it to my mouth. When people erase you in public, it's never the screaming that cuts deepest. It's the way your name goes quiet while they still use your things. I didn't speak of it to anyone. Not the librarian, not my neighbor, not even myself in the mirror. Only the pen knew, and the line through his name remained there silent and clean. I used to think silence meant weakness, that letting others speak last meant losing the conversation. Now I know silence has its own sharpness, just slower to cut. The call to Harold took less than 4 minutes. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize for the early hour. I told him I needed to revise the durable power of attorney revoke access for Eric and Rachel and halt all automatic transfers from the retirement accounts. He didn't sound surprised, only said he'd email the new documents by noon and bring hard copies in person if I preferred. I hung up and unplugged the kitchen phone, the cordless one with the sticky 5 key. After that, I called the bank. The woman on the other end used my name 4 times too cheerfully, like she didn't want me to feel old. She read back, "The changes slowly revoke. Eric Bennett as authorized user remove. Rachel Bennett from emergency beneficiary lock all recurring distributions for the education fund." I said yes to each without repeating myself. When she asked if I'd like to add anyone new, I paused, then said no. Just leave it quiet for now. In the family group chat, I typed 1 line. "Don't send any more mail to the old address. I'll reach out if I need to." No greeting, no explanation. I watched the gray check marks turn blue. Eric replied first. "You're acting like a stranger." Then a few seconds later, another message. "Is this really necessary?" Rachel sent a pink heart sticker. I closed the app before it animated. Later, Ruby messaged privately. "Mom says you're just overwhelmed. She says we should give you space. I don't know what happened, but we still care about you. Still." As though care were a leftover. As though they meant to remember, but simply ran out of time. I typed, "If you cared, you wouldn't have forgotten," and pressed send. A moment later, I deleted the message from the thread, not to undo it, but to let the silence settle deeper. I didn't block her. I didn't mute the chat. I left the door visible only no longer open. In the hallway closet, I found the faded green storage bin with the cracked corner. I opened the photo albums first. The early ones were heavier. Film prints. Some had curled edges. I touched the one of Eric in his graduation robe. My late husband's handwriting on the back. June 1989. Our boy made it. I slid it into a manila folder along with the rest. The drawer with keepsakes was next. A Father's Day card I'd helped Ruby make her shaky crayons inside the lines. A bracelet of wooden beads she gave me when she was 6. A napkin with Eric's first scribbled drawing of a tree. I didn't cry. I didn't pause. I placed them all into a box labeled "Not for Keeping." I sat on the floor and folded the soft blue cardigan I used to wear on Sunday visits. The one Rachel once looked at and said, "That color makes you disappear into the couch." Disappear. She said it without raising her eyes from her tablet. She didn't mean to be cruel. That's what made it stay. I packed the cardigan. At the bottom of the wardrobe, I found a shoebox with envelopes I had written, but never mailed. Birthday cards I'd bought early and then second-guessed. A Mother's Day letter to Rachel, where I had written, "You are raising them well. I see your effort." It was never good timing to send it. I burned that one in the sink. Just that one. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't update my location or leave a note. I took nothing that didn't belong to me. I simply stopped responding. The family calendar that Rachel used to sync holidays sent a notification that said Thanksgiving dinner, head count due. I pressed decline without reading the details. Eric sent one final message 2 days later. I'm sorry if you felt excluded. That was never our intention. We've just been trying to create boundaries. He ended it with a thumbs up emoji. It felt like a stamp on a box they were done unpacking. I didn't reply. I printed the message, folded it 3 ways, and taped it to the inside of the last cardboard box I packed. At the post office, I canceled the forwarding address I'd filed a year ago. The clerk asked why. Just simplifying, I said. He nodded. When I returned home, I walked to the guest room. It used to be for Ruby when she was small. The walls still had the faint outline where I'd hung her drawing of a sun with 8 uneven rays. She once told me, "That's you, Grandma. You're the bright part in the middle." I sat on the edge of the bed and traced the corner of the wallpaper where it had peeled slightly. They didn't need to shout at me. They didn't need to slam a door. They erased me by degrees until silence was the only language left that didn't echo. In the evening, I made a list of passwords and bank contacts, wrote it neatly in pen, and locked it in the file drawer. Not because I feared anything, but because there would be no next emergency where someone would come rushing to ask me how to fix things. I wasn't waiting anymore. I removed the framed photo in the kitchen, the one of all 5 of us at the orchard 10 years ago. I left the hook in the wall. Just the hook. Empty. Small. A reminder that something had once belonged there and now didn't. I took the photo and placed it in the last empty drawer. Then I opened my planner, turned to November 23rd, and wrote nothing. Not a note. Not a reminder. Just nothing. And I left it that way. I never realized how loud a closed door can sound until it doesn't echo anymore. The new apartment was smaller than any room I'd ever called mine, but I didn't measure it in square feet. I measured it by how many drawers I didn't have to share, how many cups I could place wherever I liked without them being rearranged, and how the floor creaked only under my own weight. There was no hallway of judgment, no shoes piled by the door that didn't belong to me, no fridge magnet calendars counting down someone else's life. The walls had scratches in them. Not decorative ones, just the kind that came with age and nobody needing things to look perfect anymore. A woman in the downstairs unit watered her plants every morning. I could hear the splashing through the pipe above the stove. That became my clock. I bought a second-hand electric kettle and a narrow wooden shelf from a flea market where no one looked twice at me. The kettle had a chipped handle, and the shelf leaned slightly to the right. I didn't mind. I placed 3 books I still reread. One had my name written in pencil on the first page, faded, but still there, not erased. On the door, I taped a note that read, "I live here. I'm not waiting anymore." The paper curled at the edges after 2 days. I left it up. The studio had a small balcony that looked over the street. It could barely fit a chair, but it had sun in the morning and the smell of bread from the bakery across the road. The first time I sat out there, I brought a cup of tea and didn't think about who might be needing me. The silence wasn't heavy. It was just unused. That day, I took out the small journal I'd avoided for a long time. The first page had a grocery list from last year written in Eric's handwriting. I tore it out. On the next page, I wrote in block letters, Day 1. I didn't apologize for existing. I underlined it once. In the evenings, I listened to the same local radio station I used to play when Ruby was small. The host's voice hadn't changed, though the music had. He still announced the weather like it was personal. "Bundle up, folks. It's a chilly one. But no snow yet. We'll call that a win." I found myself nodding along. One morning, I walked to the open-air market down the block. I moved slowly. Not because I was tired, but because no one was waiting on me. The vendor stalls were half-packed with overripe pears and cracked soaps and baskets of threadbare scarves. I passed a fabric table and paused. There, among a pile of old handkerchiefs, was one with blue thread, embroidery. Tiny violets in the corner stitched in a pattern I hadn't seen since my mother's drawer. My fingers closed around it before I knew what I was doing. The seller didn't ask questions. I paid in cash. At home, I rinsed the handkerchief gently and laid it flat to dry beside the windowsill. I didn't fold it. I let it stay visible. Later that day, a text came from Ruby Grandma. "Are you okay? You haven't answered in a while." I stared at it for several minutes. Then another came. "I know things got weird, but Mom said to reach out, that we should keep communication open for who I didn't reply." I opened a box of tea bags instead, each one wrapped in thin paper that crackled. I brewed the tea and left the phone face down. The only call I made that week was to cancel a subscription I hadn't meant to keep. The young man on the line asked why I was leaving. I told him I don't want anything that follows me without asking. He said he understood. I made myself dinner with ingredients I didn't have to explain. A can of lentils, garlic soft bread from the bakery. No one turned up their nose. No one said, "That's it." I hung one photo on the wall. Me not smiling, just sitting on a bench in 1978, wearing a coat I'd sewn myself. I don't know who took the photo. That seemed right. In the afternoon, I swept the floor, even though it wasn't dirty. I liked the sound. On the 7th day, it rained. Not heavy, just a mist that came and went. I made tea and carried my cup to the balcony. I didn't bring an umbrella. I didn't cover the seat. I let myself get slightly damp. The chair held me even damp. I sipped the tea slowly. The rim of the cup was chipped. The rain caught in the corner of my sleeve. I watched it soak the fabric. I didn't think about Thanksgiving. I didn't think about who had the last word. I didn't play the messages back in my head. I didn't search for replies that never came. I didn't open the family chat. I didn't scroll through what Rachel was posting. I didn't. A car passed by playing music too loud. The bass shook the windows faintly. I didn't flinch. Inside, the handkerchief was still on the sill, now dry its embroidery taut. I left it there. I didn't need anyone to say I was missed. I didn't need to be tagged. I didn't need to be remembered correctly. That night before sleep, I wrote 3 words in the journal without a date. No one asked. And I turned off the light. Some messages arrive not to reconnect, but to confirm what was lost. The email from Harold appeared just after I'd reheated my tea for the 3rd time. He kept the wording brief. 1 sentence, 1 line break, then the question. "Can you confirm that you wish to remove your son, Mr. Eric Bennett, from the current beneficiary designation?" I didn't answer right away. I sat for a long time, staring at the subject line without opening the thread again. I already knew the contents. It meant someone had noticed. The phone rang that afternoon. I let it ring through once, twice, 4 times. Eric left messages each time. Mom, something came through the lawyer's office. "I think there's a mistake. Can we talk another one? I really don't want to go through this formally. We can work it out, can't we?" And again, "Are you upset about the trust thing? I thought we were aligned. We all contribute differently." Rachel's been handling outreach. That's still for the family. One last one. "Can you just call me back? You don't need to make decisions like this on your own." I turned the phone face down. Rachel's name came next in a short text bubble. "Family is forever, Gloria. Legal things come and go. Our bond doesn't." Below it, a photo. A dinner table set with gold-rimmed plates, candles lit. One chair at the end noticeably empty. A caption. "This place has always been yours." I clicked to expand the image. The cloth napkins matched the ones I'd embroidered the year Eric got his first job. They'd kept those. The silverware I'd bought in pieces over 6 Christmases. Still polished. The wine bottle open but untouched. On the seat of the empty chair, a small gift bag. Zooming in, I recognized the tag. My handwriting. Last Thanksgiving. They hadn't opened it. The ribbon hadn't even been untied. I locked the screen. Later that evening, Ruby's name flashed across. A message with a screenshot. A group chat full of laughing emojis and captions. Guess Grandma finally got kicked out. She's probably in one of those apartments with shared bathrooms. At least now Rachel can redo the kitchen. Ruby wrote underneath, I didn't reply to them. Just wanted you to know, Mom says you're under stress. Everyone still cares. I typed 4 words, then erased them. Instead, I folded the dish towel in my hand and put it away carefully. The hem was starting to fray. I left it as it was. At 9:12 p.m., Rachel messaged again. We're still a family. This can't really be about money. She followed it with a second image, a polished letterboard on the wall that read, thankful, grateful, blessed. No one had asked if I had eaten. I didn't reply to any of them. I pulled the manila folder from the bottom drawer, the one with tabs labeled Title, Deed, Beneficiaries, Trust Amendment. No one else had touched it. That was enough. I checked each document under the lamp. One signature still had a faint fingerprint smudge mine. I left it uncorrected. The old radio clicked on by itself for the evening hour. A voice low and mellow said something about early snow in the north and storms passing through quietly. I left the volume where it was. The following morning, I wrapped the folder in a plastic sleeve. I didn't take an umbrella. The walk to the bank wasn't long and the air wasn't cold enough to need one. When I reached the front desk, I passed the folder forward and signed where the clerk indicated. She didn't ask questions. She offered me a pen with a floral grip. I used my own. No calls came that night. Just one final message from Rachel. We miss you, but you're making this harder than it has to be. I took out the tea tin and filled the kettle again. This time I let it whistle. I didn't silence it halfway like I usually did. The cup had a faint crack along the side. I drank from it anyway. I reread the note I'd once taped to the door. The edges had curled more. The ink had faded a bit. I live here. I'm not waiting anymore. I left it up. There was no great confrontation, no suitcase on the porch, no neighbors looking on. Only a silence too quiet to misunderstand. They had come back, but only after something slipped from their hands. Not to find me, but to retrieve the image of me that had once served a purpose. No one asked if I felt safe. No one asked where I slept. No one asked if I was still wearing the same cardigan. I was. One sleeve had lost a button. I stitched a mismatched one in its place last week. It held. That night I turned the phone off completely, not silent, not do not disturb. Off. I wrote a single line in the journal before sleep. They came late, and not for me. I used to think stillness was something you earned, like peace came at the end of a long race, some prize handed to the one who endured most. But it turns out, stillness is just the absence of noise, internal, external, familial. There's a clock on my wall that ticks 2 seconds behind. I don't fix it. Its delay is familiar, predictable. I like watching it try to catch up knowing it never will. It reminds me of someone I used to be. My days are quiet now. I take editing work from small publishing houses, mostly memoirs by strangers, who need their lives to make sense in 200 pages. I correct misplaced commas, rearrange confessions, trim nostalgia. Sometimes their words remind me of Eric's 5th grade essay, about family being like a nest. You don't always see the bird, but you know it's there. I wonder if he meant me or someone else. I shop early when the stores are mostly empty. I know exactly how many eggs I'll eat in a week. I buy them 1 carton at a time. I steam vegetables. I toast bread. I label jars not because I forget, but because the names make them mine. Chickpeas, jasmine rice, rosemary. One afternoon, I bought a cactus from a roadside vendor. The woman wrapped it in brown paper. I asked if it had a name. She said, "Only if it survives. It's on my windowsill now next to a chipped mug I don't drink from, but won't throw away." I wrote on the pot in pen, "Gloria does not require daily watering." Sophie showed up unannounced. She had grown taller, her hair shorter, more sure of herself than I remembered. She stood just inside the door, eyes roaming the room like it might shrink. "This place is small." "It's enough," I answered. She sat on the single armchair. "Do you miss the house?" "Home is where no one calls you a burden." She didn't reply. Her gaze drifted to the cactus. "It's alive," I added. "That's the only requirement now." She offered a polite laugh, then held up a wrapped tin. "Mom sent banana bread. I stopped eating sugar," she figured. After she left, I placed the tin in the freezer. It's still there. It reminds me that people give out of guilt, too. That's not something to be mad about. It's just something to know. Ruby messaged the next day. "Could you co-sign my summer tuition? Just need a backup. Mom says it's tight this month." I stared at the screen, then typed, "I can't. I trust you'll figure something out." She read it. No reply. I turned off notifications. At the market, I found an old woman selling notebooks sewn by hand. The covers were rough cloth, the thread uneven. I chose one in faded blue. That night, I opened to the first page and wrote, "This body doesn't owe anyone a thing." I keep the notebook near the stove. Between editing jobs, I write a line or two, never whole pages, just fragments. Like the most painful goodbyes are ones you never get to say. Inheritance can't heal absence. You can outgrow people who raised you. The radiator hums at night. It makes the same sound Eric's lullaby tape once made when the batteries wore down. That low mechanical whine that meant it was time to sleep. Funny how certain sounds carry more memory than photos. Rachel sent a voice memo last week. "Eric's worried. He thinks you're unwell." "Maybe depressed." She paused, then added, "You know it wouldn't hurt to talk to someone." I deleted the message. Not because it was cruel, because it was predictable. Once I thought love was owed to me, that people would eventually circle back, remember who stood beside them when no one else did. Now I think love is a thing you offer freely or not at all. And when it's not returned, the echo is your answer. I rearranged the kitchen again, labeled a new jar, oolong tea. I brewed a cup. The steam rose slowly, quietly, like nothing was chasing it. I thought about Thanksgiving, how the table used to stretch with extra leaves chairs pulled from the garage. I thought about the year Ruby asked if I could sit at the kids' table because the cousins liked me better. I sip my tea slowly now. Not because I savor it, but because I can. There's a sweater I keep folded on the back of the chair. It's unraveling at the sleeve. I could fix it, but the loosened thread feels honest. I used to reheat food I didn't like just to make others feel at home. I don't do that anymore. A neighbor boy knocked once asking if I'd seen his cat. I told him no, then offered a flashlight. He blinked at me. "You don't look like someone who lives alone." I smiled. That's the trick. I watched him disappear down the hall, humming. That night I lay under a quilt, made by someone long gone. The stitching formed a star that never repeated. I traced it with my finger. I thought about how silence isn't empty. It just stops asking for permission. And I let that thought settle like dust on a shelf. I no longer wiped clean for guests who never showed up. I used to think that silence was something imposed, what filled the space when you were not allowed to speak. I see now it can be something chosen too. The folder I brought to the bank was soft around the edges, creased in places from being handled too long. Inside were documents I had reviewed so many times I could trace the signature lines from memory. I didn't wear perfume that day. I didn't need to carry the version of myself that used to ask for a seat at their table. The banker had a pin shaped like a gold leaf. She handed me the final form, and I signed the trust transfer with a pen that stuttered slightly at the start. All assets, savings, and property, everything tied to my name, redirected with no return path. Beneficiary Sophie Clay. No blood relation. No ceremony. Just a name I could still believe in. I folded the carbon copy and slipped it into the folder behind the others. She looked at the paperwork, then at me. Is there a reason you're not listing immediate family? Her voice was polite. Curious. I tucked the pen back into my bag. That list changed, I said. She nodded once, too practiced to ask more. Later that afternoon, I called Harold Quinn. I didn't rehearse the words. I read them straight from a sheet I had written 2 weeks ago. I want to remove Eric Bennett and Rachel Hayes from all testamentary documents, effective immediately, full exclusion, no contingencies, no charitable conditions in their name, no shared ownership of any kind. A pause. And yes, I understand what that means. He confirmed receipt, then asked if I wanted a formal letter sent to them. I said no. I would send something myself. The envelope I prepared contained 3 things. First, a notarized copy of the rescinded power of attorney form. The top right corner still had a faint shadow where the staple used to be. Second, a photograph, our first family portrait taken the summer I was still wearing my maiden name. Eric had just turned 7, and Rachel wore a cardigan with the buttons misaligned. I had trimmed it carefully with sewing scissors, cutting out the part with their father, then the children, and leaving only my figure standing behind the bench, smiling slightly, holding a small purse in both hands. Last, a sheet of plain paper, cream-colored thick. On it, in ink that didn't bleed, I had written 2 words, "That's enough." I sealed the envelope with a strip of clear tape, nothing handwritten on the outside, just a typed address, no return name. When I brought it to the post office, the clerk was folding international forms, half distracted. "Would you like to require a signature on delivery?" she asked. I met her eyes. "No, I don't expect acknowledgement." She hesitated, then stamped the parcel. "Certified still lets you track when it arrives." "That's fine." I held the receipt in my palm for a moment before tucking it into my wallet behind an old train stub from last year. I hadn't thrown that one away, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe because it reminded me I had once left somewhere without explaining. Back at home, I sat on the floor beside the laundry basket, not because it was full, but because the clothes inside smelled like nothing. No house scent. No fabric softener I never picked. I ran my hand over the folded corner of a cotton shirt and looked around the room, small, neat mine. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It just was. 3 messages came in that evening, all from Eric. "Mom, I don't understand what's going on. Rachel says you're overreacting. Can we please talk before you do something you'll regret? This is starting to affect the kids. People are asking questions." I didn't open the voice notes. I deleted them. Sophie had left a card tucked into my mailbox the week before. On the front, a watercolor cactus, lopsided and awkward, with a single red flower blooming from one arm. Inside, in blocky handwriting, "You're the only adult I know who got stronger after being cut." I kept it beside my reading chair, under the coaster. There had been a time when I edited their grammar in birthday cards. Now I edited contracts, book blurbs, things that paid in small deposits but cost no part of me. I sent back clean pages and invoices, and no one called at midnight or used the word sacrifice like a debt to be collected. I cooked for one, stocked one shelf of the fridge, folded towels that only my hands touched. And none of it made me smaller. Rachel's mother had once told me at a dinner, "You're the type of woman who fills in gaps, not the one people design around." She said it, smiling, glass raised as though it were a compliment. She wasn't wrong. I did fill gaps. Leaky budgets, empty calendars, quiet birthdays, until I looked around and realized the gaps were the only place they ever put me. I hadn't designed this life, but I had finished it myself. In the days that followed, no new messages came, not from them, a silence of another kind, one that once might have frightened me. Now it felt like air being let back into a sealed room. A week after the letter was sent, I walked past a bakery that had once catered Rachel's fundraiser event. The same logo, same pink and gold boxes stacked by the window. I thought of the display table with my name missing, the way she had waved me off stage like a vendor packing up leftovers. None of it belonged to me anymore. I reached into my bag, pulled out the trimmed photo, and stared at my hands in it, clasped, composed, unnoticed. I folded it once, then once more, and placed it into the bottom of the donation bin outside the library. The woman who stood there wasn't missing anyone. She just wasn't standing behind them anymore. I didn't need forgiveness. I didn't need them to understand. I had written my last word and mailed it without asking who would read it. I never noticed how quiet warmth feels different from silence. I boiled water in the old kettle, the one with the dent near the base. The handle had darkened over the years from too many winters, but it still fit in my hand without needing correction. The mug I chose had a brown rim, porcelain smooth, no chips, something I had once locked away in the back of the cabinet because it had meant too much to risk. There was a faint ring on the table, shaped by cups. I no longer apologized for leaving. I wiped it with my sleeve, not out of habit. Just a small movement, just because I saw it. On the counter sat a single folded napkin, a pressed linen square embroidered with tiny yellow flowers. Sophie had placed it in my mailbox last week with a note clipped on, "You're still my favorite story." I hadn't replied. I didn't need to. I left it there uncreased, exactly how she folded it. The spoon clinked gently against the ceramic. I stirred the tea and opened the small notebook I kept by the windowsill. The page for today had only one line. No proving, no pleasing. Just being. Outside, the sound of wind pushed through the pine fencing. The chime above the balcony door swung just enough to make a single note clear, low, and unhurried. The neighbor's boy across the courtyard was placing something on their door, a round wreath made of tangled pine and cranberries. He stood on his toes, adjusted the ribbon, then looked up. Our eyes met across the way, and he lifted his hand with no words. I lifted mine back. That was enough. The email inbox had no red flags, no appointments, no follow-ups. Just a message from Sophie, time-stamped 6:47 a.m. "I don't know how you manage to stay soft even after everything. That's what I'm learning, that I don't have to become sharp to survive. Thank you for showing me that." I stared at her words for a long while. Then I saved the message in a folder titled Quiet Rooms. I had created it a month ago when I realized not every meaningful thing had to be responded to. Some were just meant to be carried. I scrolled back further and found an old reservation, December 12th last year. A flight I never took. The destination line felt like a stranger's plan now. I moved it into a new folder called Went, Returned. No explanation needed. My planner sat on the sideboard, opened to a blank week. I flipped past entries, each more sparse than the last, until I reached one that simply read, "Fold the blanket. Sit." I walked to the linen chair, pulled the wool throw over the backrest, and let my hands smooth the edges. The blanket still smelled faintly of lavender from a sachet I'd tucked in with the wash. Not Rachel's brand. My own. A soft thump by the door. Whisker again. I didn't own him, and he didn't belong to anyone. Still, he returned like clockwork, tail, low eyes, indifferent. I let him in. He brushed against my ankle without looking up, then circled twice and sat near the radiator. I had stopped asking for affection, and yet in small ways it still came. There was a drawer by the entryway, one I used to fill with mail receipts, outdated warranties. I opened it. Empty. Only a single paperclip lay in the corner. I closed it again, slowly. On the fridge was a magnet that once held grocery lists. Now it held a photograph. Not of anyone else. Just the view from my balcony, the iron railing, the way morning sun struck the leaves, the uneven paint on the brick across the alley. I had taken it myself. Labeled the back mine, entirely mine. There had been no calls that week. No updates, no corrections, no attempts. Even the silence had stopped apologizing for itself. I did receive a card unsigned with only one line printed in thick black font. It was never about the money. I placed it under a stack of books and didn't look again. Later that afternoon, I cleaned the drawer where I once kept legal documents. Most had been scanned and backed up months ago. I pulled out the last envelope, the one with the family photo cut down the middle. Half a woman left. Half a table. Enough space now to stand alone without being cropped by someone else's presence. I sealed the envelope in a manila sleeve, labeled it, "No forwarding address." I didn't plan to send it. Just knowing it was there felt final. Before dinner, I sat by the balcony door. The sky was shifting gray tones, dissolving into a soft plum hue. No dramatic colors, just enough light to read by. I brought out the note from Sophie again, reread it, then turned it over and wrote, "When the noise fades, your voice will still count." I placed it in the same envelope where I kept her first drawing, one she had given me at age 7, all wobbly lines and stick figures. In that picture, I had a cape. No one else did. When the kettle clicked off again, I didn't rush to refill the cup. I let the quiet settle. I let the light lean across the table. I let Whisker breathe in rhythm with the room. I turned the last page of the notebook and wrote one more thing. If no one claps, it doesn't mean I didn't dance. Then I folded the book closed, placed it gently on the windowsill, and let the breeze ruffle its edge. I didn't speak. I didn't stand. I didn't wait for the door. I just let stillness sit beside me and felt full.